Podcast with Appalachian Liberty. Today, for my guests, I have the chair and the co-chair of the American Liberty Caucus, Sean Kennedy and Justin Miramouti. Welcome again to the Great Object Podcast, the podcast where we dive into history to study tyrants. We're going to study how they rise, how they fall, and what you and I could do to make them fall faster. We're going to just jump right into it because we got some friends of ours that have a big podcast coming soon, and we're all going to go raid that afterwards. But let's just go ahead and introduce our guest today, Sean Kennedy. You are the chair of the American Liberty Caucus, the caucus that I'm a part of, and I believe you're a town councilman in Massachusetts, correct?
Yeah, that's right, Travis. Thanks for having me on. I am the chair of the American Liberty Caucus. We've been around for about a year and a half now. We got Justin here also as vice chair, and I'm also an elected official locally. I am the chair in Massachusetts for the Libertarian Party as well. So I kind of spread around a little bit, try to stay busy within the Liberty movement.
Right on. How about you, Justin?
So I'm the vice chair of the American Liberty Caucus, and I've been active within the Libertarian Party of Michigan over the past couple of years as well, and currently working with one of our candidates in a runoff election as that's moving forward here in the next couple months.
Right on. Well, I think one of the biggest things, like you don't see a lot with these type of podcasts is we don't take very much time and know each other as people. So like I just kind of wanted to get to feel like who you guys are and like what what kind of people you are in life. Like, so just tell me like where you're from and like how did you get started in the liberty space? Like what stuck out to you and made it your seminal moment that just set you on this course for life. Take it away, Sean.
Yeah, so I've grown up in the communist hellhole of Massachusetts my whole life, just south of Boston, moved around a bit. And over the period during COVID, I got really sick and tired of what was going on. I was working at the time as a full-time firefighter, paramedic. We were dealing with that stuff firsthand for COVID, all the restrictions, the complete breakdown of all the procedures that were in place for emergencies like this. And I've always had libertarian leanings, especially on gun rights and the Second Amendment and what the role the government should play in our lives and what it shouldn't play and the involvement it shouldn't have. So I just happened to stumble across just an X Spaces with libertarians in it and ended up getting involved in a presidential campaign that was launched around that time in the summer of 23. I moved up in that organization in the campaign itself. And I just hung around after that, got involved at the local level, went to my local meetings, got to know some of the great people that we have in Massachusetts that are libertarians as well. And they asked me to jump on board for the state committee. And I got elected 2 years ago as a comms director, and this previous year I was on as chair. And we have a convention coming up also in a few weeks, hoping to add some people and just get more people involved. So that sent me off on another path too. Locally, I am a vice president of a local special education parent advisory group. My daughter has special needs. I have 3 kids, and the skills learned doing things in the Libertarian Party, I was able to bridge that into a local group. And through showing up and speaking my mind at town council meetings, I was asked to run for a town council seat against a incumbent. So that was successful. And we have the caucus as well. We're trying to get people elected locally all around the country and do what we can to help whenever we can. And that's kind of been the thing that I've been doing now for the last few years.
Very cool. I see you got a guitar behind you there. Do you play very much?
I play poorly. It's a nice ornament on the wall.
you play better than I do, I'm sure. So how about you, Justin?
So I was more a passive member of the Liberty movement prior to COVID, but similar to Sean, that's when I became more active and just sort of saw the need to actually take more political action and try and expand liberty in our tangible lifetime. I guess kind of served as a wake-up call for a lot of people just to see how far many people in society were willing to let them take things. And particularly here in Michigan, where I've spent most of my life, moved around a little bit, spent a little time in Pennsylvania as well as Illinois. But most of my life has been here in Michigan, and the lockdowns were just so strenuous that it really, I think the state's still recovering from it today. So in that time, I joined the Libertarian Party and was elected to the state board, and then was elected chair, which I briefly served as. And now, like I said, my main focus is helping candidates and expanding liberty locally.
Well, that's great, man. So if I remember, I think I met both of you guys on the Josh Smith presidential campaign, right? Or was it a little bit before that? I have a hard time remembering, but
Yeah, I think it was Josh Smith, his campaign. Yeah.
right on. Yeah, Josh is a great guy, man. I kind of miss his podcast. So like, let's see. Pop back to my show notes here. Sorry, everybody. I'm sick as a dog. I'm gonna be slow, but so what kind of hobbies do you guys do? Like, what do you do for fun whenever we're not cyberbullying the government?
I got 3 kids, so my hands are between that and the multiple volunteer organizations I have, that kind of comes in and out of being a hobby, I'd probably say. If I want to sit down and totally disengage, probably some strategy style kind of gaming just to get my mind off, but that is few and far between now. So if you want to call drinking whiskey and smoking cigars a hobby, that's probably more in line with what I have time to do.
I would say that's definitely a hobby, because cigars get real technical real fast. How about you, Justin?
Oh, well, similar to Sean, I have actually 6 kids in the household, so there's not a whole lot of time for hobbies. I do like to read when I get the chance, but more often than not, it's listening to podcasts, audiobooks, things of that nature.
Right on. Yeah, I play, I have an embarrassing amount of time in Total War. It's mostly just because I'm such a history nerd, and I just like actually reenacting these battles and stuff like that. But so like, who are some of your favorite foundational authors? Like mine would be like Rothbard and Hayek and stuff like that, and definitely Frank Herbert from Dune.
Yeah, I'd say so. My kind of run into this is probably a little bit different. Mine were purely based on ideological views that I kind of grew up with. I didn't really get into reading libertarian texts until I felt like I needed to converse based on what everyone else was reading. So yeah, I Rothbard, Hop. I think Mises is a good read if you're looking for more of a background on where those people come from. But I'd also, I'd say like there's some James Burnham books that are very relevant to what we're dealing with politically these days.
Okay.
And there's some good Robert Greene books. They're kind of messed up because they're about manipulation and things like that. But at the same time, they do give you a perspective as to how people throughout history have manipulated different aspects of society. So
yeah, you mean the 48 Laws of Power?
Yeah, 48 Laws of Power, 33 Strategies of War is a good one. There's a lot of
I don't think I read that one.
Yeah, there's a lot of Art of War stuff in there from different that kind of style stuff. So there's some overlap. But yeah, it gives you a good background understanding, not just on the philosophy, like there's the philosophy of libertarian things, but that stuff gives you like actionable things or things that people have done to get what they want. Some of them are awful. But it gives you perspectives, and some of it can be useful in minor ways or helps you kind of just see perspectives on what people do and avenues people take on things.
Right on. Yeah. How about you, Justin?
Well, everyone you guys mentioned is perhaps a little further down the path than my initial, where I was thinking. Like the names that sort of push me toward libertarianism aren't necessarily people that always get brought up in the libertarian circles, although, certainly Ayn Rand, Ron Paul, things of that nature. But Thomas Sowell sometimes gets brought up in libertarian circles, though, as with many of us, not a real libertarian type thing, but certainly got me thinking in different ways about economics than I had been up to that point. And same with Ayn Rand, just the way you approach the world, can change through different perspectives with a lot of these authors, and I would say those were the two most formative for me.
Right on. Yeah, growing up here in the mountains, like it's like I don't know. I don't want to say it's like an anarchist commune, but like it almost doesn't matter what the laws are because you never get messed with until you actually start like hurting someone. And I didn't realize that everywhere wasn't like that until just like maybe 10 years ago. Like I didn't know you could just get randomly stopped by the cops like until I was already an adult. And yeah, it's just up here, like Republican and Democrat, you really start talking to them. Every single one of them's anarchists. They all hate the government like a great deal. Chuck and Money says Bastiat. I've never read Bastiat. I probably need to. So I was wanting to talk about like a little bit of the history of the liberty movement. I guess most people know like Rothbard and like the Anatomy of the State and stuff like that. Which the night that I learned about Anatomy of the State, I listened to it like twice, and then I read it like another 3 times by myself. But in it, he's going through like how states arise and how they fall, and what can be done to maintain liberty, and how these states operate. But then you mentioned Robert Greene, and he's talking about like how you acquire power and how you see. You get another read the law, fairly short, easy. Okay, right on. But yeah, so my biggest one was Frank Herbert. It is a science fiction novel, but if you really start to sit down with Dune 1 through 6 that he wrote, you start realizing that it's not just a science fiction story and great houses and dukes and duchesses battling it out. He's going through like how governments actually work behind the scenes and what they do, and especially towards like God Emperor of Dune book 4 and 6, like he really starts getting into how we solve this problem. Um, like later on in book 6, like the government no longer is allowed to have any privacy at all. They have to have comm eyes and microphones on them at all times. And then there's a jury at all times waiting for them to show any signs of corruption, and they immediately get removed from power. And it actually works out pretty well. But, I don't think our government's going to vote to give themselves no privacy.
They won't even vote to let us all know who they're all sexually harassing and who the taxpayers are paying for. So
I know that vote was crazy. 357 to 65. Like, wow, that's a bipartisan sex ring, man.
So it's terrible. It's terrible. Absolutely.
Yeah, like we need to just lock everybody in that building and just, I don't want to say it on live stream, but anyway. Let's see here. So what are some things that you think do work in the liberty movement? Because here in just a minute, we're going to go into things that have definitely not worked in the libertarian movement.
Things that work. That's a great question. Not many things work. And I hate to say that as somebody that is this involved. Part of that is one, people prioritizing philosophy over some kind of pragmatism, and there needs to be a balance and a balance of both. But there's a native distrust within the movement itself. I think there's a lot of it that's bred either naturally in people, or people come to distrust the government, so they seek out other people that also distrust the government. But within that group, it's so small that you have loud voices that aren't productive and are self-destructive, not only to themselves but to the movement. So there are different states that are more successful than others. It depends on what the priorities are, whether it's getting elected locally or trying to push legislation through. We have some good stuff like Defend the Guard, which basically is something that puts the states in the position to not allow their guard units to be brought up for military uses overseas unless there is an actual war declared through Congress the way the Constitution is written out. It subverts this War Powers Act nonsense that gives the president the ability to start wars whenever he wants. So, it seems to be more everyone rallying around an issue that we agree with collectively, and less about some of the other stuff that's really good about the liberty movement, like whether it's the economics or trying to just push people to have more privacy rights, or the ability to ingest what you want as an adult because you're an adult and that's on you to make those decisions for yourself. Or it's constitutional rights, pushing Second Amendment things, which are super important. And that itself has a broad appeal across multiple political areas and groups of people. So, I think that there's some good things, but to highlight something that's really been successful, at least recently, is quite challenging, unfortunately. So you kind of got to look at the individuals and what they're doing and the effects that the individuals are making. And I think that's where the priorities need to be, and that's something that the American Liberty Caucus is working on, and has been working on now since its inception, is really finding people that are active and want to do things and themselves, and want to be a part of something that is growing and assisting people, networking, getting the word out on candidates, whatever it is. They're people that do volunteer work, and there's a lot of people in the movement that don't. They're very active online, but when it comes to offline activity, they're kind of nowhere to be found. So that's a challenging thing. So, for us at the ALC, it's about finding people that show up in person, make phone calls, do texts, try to get the word out on candidates. And, we have some other stuff in the pipeline as well that we're hoping to push out later on, about helping candidates and giving people education and things like that as well.
Yeah. I remember like when you guys first invited me to the first meeting, I was sitting there going through your planks, because like I don't want to sound like I'm black-pilled or anything, but the thing is like I had already been invited to like 4 different Republican honeypots, because they're always trying to reel libertarians in. And I started going through you guys' planks, and you start quoting like the really based things that Patrick Henry said, and I'm just like, man, I really like these guys. Like, because like it seems like you guys are the real deal. So I was like, wow, okay, so this isn't a Republican honeypot. These guys are actually trying to make a difference.
No, it's not a Republican honeypot at all. We worked a lot on those planks, and there were a lot of discussions. There's a lot of libertarians that aren't going to like our planks, and that's fine. There's plenty of members that don't agree with all of them. Like, it's not a requirement that you like subvert you submit your beliefs to these planks. And there's some of those planks, even as a chair, that I lean further in a direction on myself. It was trying to find a neutral area where the majority of us could agree as a good direction to take. And the planks in some ways lean, I guess, America first, honestly, but we are all Americans. And I think a lot of us realize that some of the hardline libertarian things that are pushed in some areas, like a completely wide open border policy, that's an unrealistic topic to sell to the average American. It's just not a popular thing. It doesn't mean you totally like remove everything that's not popular to the average American. But if you're trying to grow and you're trying to help people, you can't have parts of these planks, and we have them at the national party that are a problem as well. You can't have them, one, so specific that it removes too many people. They're too divisive. But you also need to take a look at the audience and the people that you're trying to draw in, and take that into account. Personally, not an open borders person. Do I think some reasonable immigration laws should be in place? Well, yeah. And if you have a successful country and you're able to bring in valuable immigrants to our country, that's fine. But to have a completely wide open border policy like we saw for 4 years, like, where does that lead us? Well, I mean, the state didn't disappear in that time. So I'm left with funding $30,000 a year for illegal immigrants in Massachusetts to rent apartments, because they get a stipend of $30,000 now of my tax money to go rent an apartment and not leave the country. So, like,
well, also you were saying about like your water pumps in your town where they're underfunded as well. So like that's taking money away from that too,
like, where a lot of libertarians are against taxes, and for good reason, right? And what we have is we have water fees. You pay a fee, you get water to your house. All right. And you got to pay some maintenance and things like that. It's a specific tax line that you pay into. It's not into a general fund, but the state also takes our taxes. And the state, every one of us lives in a state that gives back local aid. And Massachusetts is one of the highest tax states in the country and gives back below average local aid to its cities and towns. So you got to ask yourself, well, where's my tax money going and what are they spending it on if they're not going to give it back to the towns? Because they also regulate the hell out of the towns, schools, roads, all kinds of stuff. So they overregulate you, promise you money, and then they don't follow through after a decade or two. And before you know it, the only solution to following state regulations is raising local property taxes, which is not a viable solution over and over and over again, because we all have issues with property taxes as well, right? Like you're kind of renting your property from the government. So it's a very broken system. And a lot of it comes down to, where do you start? Like what issues do you focus on first? Because they all can't be fixed in one fell swoop. What can you sell Americans on? These are important topics, and it's not just selling someone to sell them it. It's about, like, where do you meet on these things and where do people prioritize things? And a lot of Americans are proud to be American, and I'm proud to be an American. The government sucks, but you know, being patriotic is something that a lot of us find important. So it's you know, a lot of that in the inception of the caucus was trying to find where these lines are with libertarians and how we meet. You know, how we meet people and how we project those messages to people to try to get positive growth and good involvement.
Right on. Yeah, like yeah, it stuns me. Like I have never been a closed borders guy, but I'm definitely not open borders. We have a senator here in Virginia, right? He didn't touch United States soil until it was 2007. I've been out of high school since 2004. He's been in America less time than I've been out of high school, and he is now a senator trying to take Virginia's gun rights away. You know, that is, like, I don't know if there's a strong enough word for the disgust I feel with that. You know, do I have a problem with his race? No, I do not. I don't give a crap what color his skin is. I don't care what religion he's part of. But when you're moving here, I feel like just the fact that you're moving here, you have already admitted that there's more value here than there was in Bangladesh. And he came from Bangladesh, but now he's trying to turn this country into Bangladesh. And that is a big problem for me. You got anything, Justin?
Well, just to taper it back to sort of what works, what doesn't work. So as far as that goes, the biggest thing is to set attainable goals. So we all did sort of meet over a presidential campaign. I don't think any one of us on this, you know, or listening, anticipates a libertarian presidency in the next decade or two. However, when you set the attainable goals and you show up, you can actually make things happen. And then from there, the biggest thing is to have a plan to sort of level that up. So once you get from point A to point B, what does point C look like? And then if you can get, you know, the ball rolling, then things can start to move. Beyond that, just building contacts and, you know, really and truly choosing your battles wisely, which is different depending on your local municipality or state. You know, gun rights is going to be an easier sell in Texas. You're going to have a lot more support than you might in California. You know, there are different liberty causes you might be able to drum up more support for in California, at least initially, to sort of grow your base out. And then you can sort of have that gun rights conversation, because that might be, you know, something that you need to bridge the gap on a little more with those individuals. You know, whereas, you know, as far as the conversation about the various differences that we have with the Republican Party, you know, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they almost never do what they say they're going to do. And then a lot of it has to do with the fact that ultimately they're just continue to that, again, you know, say one thing, do another. If it was the party of Ron Paul, I don't think we would have too much of an issue with it. but it's definitely far from
Yeah,
that.
for sure. Because like the thing that stuns me is like if you look at just the American electorate, the way that we behave in elections, almost to a man, the anti-war candidate always wins. Like Barack Obama, he campaigned anti-war. Trump campaigned anti-war. Biden, he didn't really campaign. Let's just be honest. Uh, Even going back to Woodrow Wilson, he campaigned on anti-war. He kept us out of the war, in 1916, and then immediately after, like he invokes the Espionage Act and starts getting protesters arrested for campaigning against the war. So I think these politicians know exactly what we want, but because of our system, they get in and then they don't have to honor anything that they said on the campaign trail. Republicans, they campaign like they're libertarians, but the second they get in there, it's the Epstein class.
Always.
It's the Israeli wars. It's the sorry, I keep forgetting to change the camera screens, but like yeah, it just blows my mind. But then like a few weeks ago, I was on a podcast beside Amanda Griffith. Everybody go follow her. She's an OG. It's Ajax the Griff, by the way, on Twitter. Anyway, she studies the Bolshevik Revolution, and she asked me what period of history that I study, and I didn't really have a good answer for her. I never really thought about history and periods, like becoming a specialist on periods. Well, like I didn't have a good answer for her, and I said, well, I just I'm more of a generalist, which I've thought more about it since then, and I study tyrants. I study people who have risen up and what they do. Looks like we lost Justin there. So anyway, I study tyrants, and I feel like there's this repeating pattern to them. Like even if you go back to Julius Caesar, 2,000 years ago, right? He was mixing in zinc to the silver supply of the empire, and basically doing what the Federal Reserve is doing now. So these are very, very old questions. These are very, very old principles that all governments have done. And this is a cycle that we think is new because it feels like the libertarian movement came from Murray Rothbard, but that's not the case at all. If you go back to Plato and Aristotle, like we're talking like almost 3,000 years ago, Aristotle in his seminal work, The Politics, what he was doing was he collected, I think it was like 158 different constitutions. Like he was collecting constitutions like they were Pokemon cards, right? And he was reading all of them. And he was and what politics is he's setting out what patterns there are in these things and how democracies always lead to lower trust societies. He was showing various things like I think it's the Syracusans. They didn't even allow their slaves to do gymnastic workouts because they were afraid of slave revolts. Because like if the slaves got stronger than they had, then he was talking about Sparta at one point. Sparta was basically a communist dictatorship. I know it was a cool movie, The 300 and all that, but the real Sparta was a communist dictatorship that was propped up by slave labor. These are just very old questions. The liberty versus the state thing, that is the oldest thing that humanity has ever discussed, and we're still discussing it today, and we're no closer to answers than we are back then. What do you got, Sean?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you're totally right. And in an age where we have the absolute most information at your fingertips, it's still a conversation that's happening. So why is that, right? Why do we still have these conversations? Why is this still a question? A lot of it comes down to, we have a public school system based on a Prussian model that basically trains your children to be factory workers or the equivalent. Now it's service workers. It does not train or teach them how to think, how to question things, logic. It is this is what you're taught. You go do this, and your life will be great, right? You're sold on something. And I think in the last, I'd say 20 years, that cell has disappeared, right? We lost what the boomers had it great, right? They're coming off their great economy, coming off the Second World War, and you could get a job, support your family with one income, like all these things that have just devolved over the last 60 some odd years. And we're still questioning that stuff because it's not taught. And unless you go look for it, you don't learn about it. you know, or you're brushed up on a few things in school, and you're kind of taught a surface level of these things, and you move on. So you thought you were learned about, you know, whether it's Caesar or the Spartan or the Greeks or even Plato and Aristotle or Socrates. Like, what are you actually taught about these individuals, right? Oh, they existed. They were important. They did some stuff. They wrote, you know, maybe they wrote some books, and yeah, time to move on. We're gonna go to the next thing, right? You're not taught about what the core value systems are. You have to go to either find a college that teaches it, or you start looking on your own. We shouldn't be in that situation now. I don't think it's necessarily going to change, because I think things are going to move towards AI, and it's going to be even narrower on what you're looking for. When schools start to shift into that kind of learning structure, it'll be even more tightly controlled, and it benefits a select group of people that, you know, they make money off of an uneducated populace. And I totally agree with you, though. Like, it does repeat itself. At a minimum, it rhymes, right? So, yeah, it's you know, we should be way more aware of this stuff in our country than we are. When you have tons of Americans going around talking about how great communism is, after, you know, a couple of generations removed from a war where America probably didn't go far enough in that war to stomp that out, you know, you can still see remnants of it in Eastern Europe, where they hate communism because they had to live under it, right? They still remember what that was like. They grew up under parents or grandparents who experienced it firsthand. And we have people in our country that are, you know, just anti-government, and they think things are actually free somehow. Like, we don't pay for it in one way or another. So yeah, I agree with you. It's a lack of understanding of history. It's not a priority. And you learn enough in public schools, at least, to go get a job and be productive in an office, or, I don't know, serve lattes as a barista.
Yeah, I think a lot of people like, they really do need to just go read Marx, because once you actually sit down and start reading the Communist Manifesto or Das Kapital, like, you start realizing this guy has his head so far up his ass that he can smell yesterday's breakfast. And this is coming from a completely neutral standpoint. Like, even if you've never heard of communism before, when somebody starts talking about, like, the various trades that can be interchangeably, like, one day you can be a coffee maker and then the next you can be a cattle rancher. No, the fuck you cannot. Pardon my language, but my uncle, he was a cattle rancher. My great uncle, he was a cattle rancher for 45 years. He knew his stuff to the T. He was very, very good at it. He had a herd of like over 150. He was still killed by a raging bull. Okay. He got thrown in the air and broke like 10 ribs. And then they realized that he had cancer while his ribs were broken, and he didn't even know he had cancer. So, like, you're going to tell me one of these 100-pound soy boys from Starbucks is going to go do that job? No, you're not. No, you're not. Am I going to let a Starbucks barista give me brain surgery? No, I am not. You know, these are things, you know, like, there are specialities, you know, and Marx just admits that all labor is of equal value. No, it's not. You know, like, there's some jobs we can live without. And I made my own coffee this morning. You know what I mean?
I think you're highlighting an interesting thing, though, right? Like, there's not just that. There's Marx's stuff, there's Lenin's stuff, and then you can go, in my opinion, it's still the two sides of the same coin, but you can go over to Hitler, and, like, if you read that crap, and I think this is you're going to go back to issues in the libertarian movement. You need to write libertarian stuff like an 8th grader can comprehend it. Like, because this stuff is written for people with an IQ below 100. And if you can grasp the below average, like, if the median IQ is 100, and you need, for a movement, you need people that can't comprehend these things, can't break down the logic, can't understand this stuff on their own, but they can read it, right? They can digest some of the material. It's kind of probably 3rd grade. So yeah, to
Sean's point, I mean, 4th grade was the 4th grade level that Trump spoke at was probably his secret sauce, or one of them, in the election. It's what allowed him to connect to so many voters who never voted before, because Obama was frankly talking over all of their heads, and deliberately so. You know, he knows how to simplify what he's saying, and he knows how to use brevity. He's done it in the past, but more often than not, he would try and overextend his metaphors in that, to the point where the average American wouldn't understand, and Trump flipped that on its head. But yeah, no, more often than not, a lot of the time we do end up sort of talking over one another, if not the people we're trying to reach.
So there's like a hierarchy in that level though, right? Like you basically have the ability to reach right like 10 to 15 points above your IQ level and 10 to 15 points below. So if you're a super IQ stuff there's all kinds of things about IQ stuff. But generally speaking, if you're one of those super intelligent people, you got an IQ over 140, 150, and it goes, higher than that, those people almost cannot communicate to somebody who's at 85. They are so they aren't even if they're using the English language, they're not using it at the same level.
Right.
In the libertarian sphere, there's a lot of readers, right? Like we've all read a bunch of books. Some of it, I've had to go back and read a paragraph or two at a time. You know what I mean? Like it's just the way it is. It's like, what was that again? There kind of needs to be a version of that. Basically, yeah, Justin's right. Like kind of based on Trump, like that stuff sells, and that stuff sells when you're talking to people that kind of thing isn't in their wheelhouse. They could be an absolute genius car mechanic. They could be a genius when it comes to certain tech stuff. And any kind of laboring, they can build you a house in no time at all. They can pour your foundation, right? Like those workers, they're not dumb, but what they're good at isn't this stuff. So how do you sell it to those people? And you sell it to those people by meeting them where they're at. And it's not an offensive thing. It's just trying to get across that. Like, I know this doesn't translate well with using this context or this language or whatever. So let's bring it over here and figure out how we translate the importance of these things to you as an individual and your particular circumstances. Like then Trump, honestly, absolute genius when it comes to that.
Yeah, I believe it was something like his campaign speeches averaged 2.3 syllables per word. And I was like, wow, if you go back to just 100 years ago, back before like, I don't want to get into like suffrage and all that, but like if you go back before like more people were voting, let's say that like campaign speeches back then sounded like college dissertations, like Teddy Roosevelt, like he was using these huge words and stuff like that. And if you go back even further to Thomas Jefferson, like he was simple for his time, but like just the stuff that he would say then would fly right over people's heads now, and he wouldn't even be elected. And I feel like it's just almost perfectly correlated with the Department of Education. Like, have they actually educated anybody?
Well, I think this is the deliberate result of the Prussian school model Sean was talking about earlier. They don't want a population that can critically think about these things, because then things might actually change. It's very comfortable for them to stick you into this Democrat-Republican duopoly rubric, and just doesn't really matter to them who you vote for. I mean, if you think back across the elections in your lifetime, what was the functional difference between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney in terms of actual governance, and what you would have gotten out of that if Romney had been elected? The 2% in your corporate tax rate, maybe? I mean, in terms of the day-to-day of the government, nothing has changed, and that's how they want it. Obviously that doesn't afford us the freedom that is promised in the Constitution. And that's, where we come into play and try and get those freedoms upheld.
That's true. Yeah. Like one thing that, to your point about like how they're basically going to be the same no matter what is, I know it sounds like a non sequitur, but if you look at the history of the mafia and how the Sicilian mafia formed, Sicily, due to its position between North Africa and Italy, it is considered the most conquered island in all of human history. Like that was the first stop when armies conquered were on a campaign. They were going to stop in Sicily, take it over. Like we're talking hundreds of times. So what happened naturally is that the Sicilian people, they can't just follow a new set of laws and a new government every 2 weeks. So what they did was they started creating this system of families that would govern certain businesses. It was like kind of like a shadow oligarchy, and that slowly became what we know today as the mafia. And they were just creating like a background shadow government stability. And when we have a modern day government like we have now, that's flipping every 4 years and senators every six, of course there's going to be a shadow government. And they're going to be very, very well equipped, because if you look at who really benefits from the Federal Reserve, it ain't us. But anybody who owns a lot of property, they definitely benefit from printing all this money.
So if you to think that a relatively small group of people don't have the funding to just buy both parties, I think is an ignorant place to start. Okay.
Of course.
They have more money than we can comprehend. They're able to fund candidates on both sides. They're able to fund a good candidate and a worse candidate in the same party. They're able to do these things, and they do it over and over again, and they steer the ship. And that's what you've got with the two major parties. And I think that's why, for Republicans at least, they campaign like libertarians, and then they actually legislate like Democrats. So and Democrats used to actually be for some freedom-ish things, right? And that's been totally usurped in their own party by money, and that money pushing them further and further and further progressive through campaign donations. So, if you have this has happened across the country. They've, like, as an example, Soros has funded DAs in multiple parts of the country for the last couple decades, at least. And what he does is he funds a terrible one, and then he funds a worse one, so the terrible one looks better. And you just do that on repeat. So you're funding two people. One of them is bad, and you don't want that person because they're going to let, no cash bail and all these other issues that we have going on right now. And then they fund somebody that's so bad that no one's going to vote for that person. So the terrible one looks good, right? And that it's just these games that get played all over again. But yeah, there's so much money by a small group of people that they're essentially funding both parties. We can see that in the donation records. It's pretty obvious. It's the same groups of people funding everything. And that's kind of why it's, the one thing our system is supposed to have is the ability for people to donate individually to candidates and support individuals and push that forward and get a few at least elected, like somebody like Massey, who is going to continuously vote based on his ethics and not just vote on, what donor calls him and tells him what to do. So,
yeah. How about you, Joseph?
Well, I would echo most of what Sean said there. As far as, it all goes back to the George Carlin phrase, it's a big club and you ain't in it. That's what it boils down to. And, to think that a lot of these disagreements that you see coming out of DC are genuine, a lot of the times they're just for show. It's just, it's pro wrestling, it's the Harlem Globetrotters, whatever metaphor you prefer, but they're out there just giving us something to fight over so that they can keep doing what they really want to do.
Bread and circuses,
and they just pull whatever they can out and make sure that it's a red meat enough issue where it's a couple decades ago it was gay marriage. And, then the abortion thing picked back up a little bit, at least here in Michigan. And, now it's more of the trans issues, but it's whatever red meat issue can distract you completely from all the money that's getting printed, all the stuff that's being done supposedly in your name without your approval whatsoever. And just the backlash from that policy, Ron Paul talked about that as he was leaving. The blowback is a very real phenomenon, and it's something that is going to be continuing to increase exponentially until we can get our foreign policy in check. Until we stop doing what we're doing, it's going to get worse. And that's not a future I think any of us want for our children. We need to get that foreign policy under control.
Yeah, something that stuns me about the constant wars is Julius Caesar used to brag that he could find 100 men who would gladly go off and risk dying in war before he would find one that was willing to live in poverty. So, like back then, they were a lot more honest with their people about why they were going to war. The Iran war is not about radical Islam. It's about the Strait of Hormuz. It's about economic control of the South China Sea and those in the Suez Canal and all that. And economically, to an extent, like you can understand why they're going it because they got so much invested in it. But they're trying to sell it to us as like it's some giant holy war end times prophecy type thing, you know. And they're always just trying to find a way to sell it, and it's nonsense. One of the things I was wanting to bring up is like sometimes people say, "Oh, go start your own country," like libertarians do. You know, like when libertarians sometimes libertarians have actually started their own country. This one right here that I'm bringing up. This is a place. Well, it's not the Republic of Minerva anymore. So right here on Google Earth, right, we have so these lines don't actually exist. So what this is a sandbar that was on a reef that ships had to navigate and steer around in the past, right? Well, these libertarians, one of the leader of which was a survivor of a Holocaust like concentration camp, they had millions of tons of sand donated, and he used all of his money and raised $100 million, and he raised his own island out of the Pacific Ocean. And it was in the fishing waters of the Tonga people. And I think the Tonga people are just a little bit up here in Fiji. Well, yeah, okay, yeah, here we go. Here's the Tonga, right? So they claimed this whole thing right here because people were kind of like the world governments were freaked out because anybody with a coastline is gonna be like, oh, we're gonna have anarchist communes starting off of our shores if this gets really popular. So what they figured out is that these were the fishing waters, like the fishing waters of the Tonga Empire, right? Well, the Tonga Kingdom, and they sailed down there on one yacht and took it back by force. And what it was is these guys, they just didn't want to fight for it, you know, and then that failed. Another one over here in the North Sea of England, this one's so small that you can't even see it on Google Earth. And like I can see my yard on Google Earth, right? So it's smaller than my yard. Well, what this was is a sea fort that was created during World War II. And they were trying to keep the Nazis from coming over here and bombing. So what they did was they created all these sea forts along this coast, and there'd be 100 Marines in about each one. Well, this one guy ends up buying this one, and he declares it a sovereign nation, and it's still a sovereign nation today, but it's got a grand total population of 1. He sells titles. That's his main income is like, oh, you can become a Duke of Sealand, you can become a prince or whatever. He's like Prince Bates or something like that, if memory serves. Part of it sinks because of high tide and low tide. So like depending on the time of year, he can't access the lower levels of it. So that's a little funny. Then there's this other one over here in Copenhagen, Denmark. This is Christiania. This was an old military base, right? So these hippie commune people, they take it over, and it's still technically its own free town today, but it doesn't even have its own hospital. So they move in, and you can do drugs in here and everything, but of course you can do drugs anywhere in Copenhagen and Denmark for the most part, as long as it's not hard drugs. But like, you know, they tried to create their own country, and Denmark is still like, no, you're part of us. And then they figure out how to put it into a trust and all that. And they like it's just basically an oddity now, and Denmark's okay with it because like they're really not harming anybody. They don't have their own hospital, so it's not its own sovereign state. What just stuns me is that libertarians have actually tried to create their own countries in the past, and it just never works out because these governments are so afraid of their sovereignty game getting questioned that they just turns into they figure out any way to destroy you, you know. The Federal Reserve, it's going to constantly figure out a way to print money and keep you from getting to getting, you know, the financial independence, because even Aristotle talks about how the tyrant purposely keeps his people poor so that they won't have time and resources to challenge him. Do you guys have anything?
Yeah, there's actually on the last part, the last thing you just said about kings or those in power keeping people poor. I'm gonna butcher his name, but the El Salvadorian president kind of called this out. There's a video of clip of him where he basically says, "Why are there taxes? Why are there taxes when the government prints money and then sells those bonds for money and then funds things with those bonds that they sell for money?" And it's kind of a circular system, and it's completely broken. It doesn't make any sense. But again, you need people educated enough to understand it. So this is a known thing that's happening now. That particular one. And you're kind of, in a way, Travis, proving my point on the open borders versus closed borders-ish part, where, you know, libertarian open borders sounds great, right? Because the whole point of it is you have societies or groups of societies, small, large, competing against each other, right? So if you're successful, people want to come to you, right? They want to leave what's not successful. And you'll have a feedback of the other group going, we are no longer successful. We are going to do what the successful people are doing and change what we're doing. And that's kind of the way that this is supposed to work under that theory. But today we have every landmass is owned by somebody. And that somebody is willing to use force to maintain that landmass and tax those people and control it. And this idea that you're going to go and get a commune somewhere and the government, which will use force against you, is going to leave you alone is really like a utopian kind of philosophy, and an open borders policy for an entire country with millions of people, regardless of where it is in the world. Unless you have global libertarianism where everyone respects those kinds of lines and allows different levels of succession and people to join other countries and take their land with them and those kinds of things, you get exactly what you mentioned with those particular properties. I think the one in Britain, they basically are like, this is a decrepit World War II station that we cannot utilize. So instead of tearing it down, some guy wants to live on it, we're going to leave them alone. But the other ones are affecting fishing, and they're a lot closer to people that are very protective over what they have. And and libertarians will hate that because they're using their kingdom or their government to use that force, which is fine. But, you know, that's just the way the world works. Like that's kind of where some of the theory rubs up against reality. And the reality is, throughout time, people with the ability to drum up enough individuals to go take someone else's stuff for the betterment of themselves has always happened. And they will do that either by force directly, or they will do it indirectly, whatever that particular process is that benefits them the most, or they think will benefit them the most in the long run. It's just the way the world's always worked. And to try to push back against that in 2026 with the way the world is right now, I don't think is a valid option. It may be sometime down the road if you can capture or not capture capture a large portion of a population, not physically, but if you can take a continent and say this is the libertarian continent and everyone living here is that, you've got to start. Like, you can have an open border policy if you want, I guess, but unless it's global, it's kind of not going to work, because there's always going to be people that are willing to use things the way we've always used them as humans, people, technology, whatever it is, to take land from people, to take resources from people. Some resources are finite. You run out of resources in your area, you need somebody else's. You run out of clean water, you're going to go to the next place that has clean water. Like, because if you don't, you die, right? Like, if you don't run your economy, your people die, you lose power. Like, there's a lot of components to it, but I think those particular spots are great. I think that it's great that people have tried. But I think the reality of, and the way that those places have kind of resolved, is the expected resolution of them, where a government goes, man, not in our best interest to fight this right now, or we're going to fight that and take it back. Or, yeah, if you guys are paying your taxes to us, then yeah, sure, we'll leave you alone. You do what you want. And we're a fairly free society, and like in Copenhagen. So yeah, as long as you don't have something that's causing the rest of the population a problem, then we'll leave you alone for the most part, I guess.
Right. How about you, Justin?
Well, I think in libertarian circles, there tend to be two distinct schools of thought about sort of foreign intervention, or perhaps intervention is the wrong word, but foreign entanglements and responses. And there's certainly a decent contingent of the pacifist nature, which I would not necessarily identify with. But it's understandable that they're there. The party has its roots in opposing conscription back in the Vietnam War era. And so, there was a lot of pacifist involvement. However, there's also the more Napa-line philosophy where it's, I don't support any acts of aggression, but if you have countries aggressing against you, that seems to be the linchpin in a lot of these libertarian experiments, like the Republic of Minerva. When they were aggressed upon, they didn't respond with similar force to protect what's theirs. And at the end of the day, if you're not willing to do that much, then, like Sean said, unless you have a global government, which sounds like a complete catastrophe waiting to happen to me, then you're always going to have these competing interests. And so if you want to have a sovereign nation that has something at its core, whether it's libertarianism or not, then there does need to be some form of an immigration system in place, particularly if you want to have a democracy electing your leaders, which was something we kind of touched on earlier. And it is interesting to note, how many of the founding fathers were opposed to democracy and how many conversations they had about it. And, our system was initially deliberately set up to not be a democracy, which is somewhat surprising to probably no one on the call, but many of the average people you encounter in your day-to-day life, especially with the almost holy way they present our democracy in this day and age.
Yeah, I spend quite a lot of time just thinking about what we can do to really break this cycle, because it's just been going on for thousands of years. This is not something that's been going on since the 70s.
And so with that, ultimately, I think that the liberty movement needs to maintain its focus on, what it can accomplish in the short term and the midterm fields. And as far as involvement in the broader pictures, it's really and truly about building coalitions and finding people who agree with you on one or two issues and trying to move the ball in the right direction there, if only to metaphorically, at least, if not literally, stop the bleeding, so that there's something that we can work toward preserving.
Let me touch on one thing Justin mentioned, because it's an interesting thing. How do you, so when I'm using globalism, and it's not incorrect to assume it would be a global government of sorts, right? Which would be antithetical to libertarian philosophy. Okay, so how do you get the globally accepted libertarian philosophy of the NAP or something along those lines to everybody without a central force to preserve that? It is a problem. It's a root problem when you're talking about certain aspects of it, because you either have that, which is going to be totally against what many people for good reason don't want, right, is a globalism, but you also somehow need to educate almost globally everyone on why you don't do these things, on why freedom's important, on why private property rights are important. Like, how do you do that? And we're nowhere near that right now. We're nowhere near that in our own country. The closest thing we have to libertarian governance is, you could say, is Argentina. Argentina is still fairly socialist, because you can't suddenly just pull the rug out from the populace without them killing you and having a revolution. So, like, I agree with what Justin said in general anyways, but that one point is an interesting, and I don't want to derail the conversation either, but it's an interesting linchpin on the thing, is how do you get to the point where everyone else is leaving everyone else alone
Mhm.
without someone telling everybody they can't do that, right? Like,
Right.
and that's, you know, I think we're in a unique spot in our country because of the founding of the country and the way we
Mhm.
developed. And yeah, I don't think a strict democratic process is a functional thing. I think for the
Mhm.
most part, we generally would all agree on the call, at least on the podcast, about the fact that, like, when you give people the ability to do that, and what we've seen happen since then, it's
Mhm.
not working, right? So what do you do then? How do you navigate that? And a lot of people in America, either one, they think we live in a democracy, which is
Mhm.
wrong,
Mhm.
or they benefit from the process we have, which is fairly close to a democracy,
Mhm.
because you can take rights away or you can take money from people just by voting. So yeah, we have the problem even at home, and it kind of goes into where do you start to pick these issues apart, and what do you attack first, and what do you prioritize, and then go from there. But I just think that alone is an interesting concept, is trying to universally have that as an
Mhm.
earth doctrine of libertarianism, but also with no controls attached to it.
Yeah.
Well, the question is, how long would something
Oh,
like that survive?
yeah.
Because you got to figure, even if it starts out, you know, exactly how we would want this government to start out, you're talking about something that just is a natural draw for corruption. You're talking about a government that's more powerful than any government we currently are aware of or can conceptualize at the present moment in time that exists on this earth. And there are plenty of people willing to corrupt themselves to corrupt the governments that we have that are less powerful. So if you had one all powerful government, you'd have all the worst people in the world throwing all the money they could to get control of that one body.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
I think the thing that caught my attention is you guys with the planks you put in those Patrick Henry quotes, the ones that I'm always quoting. The great object is that every man be armed is the big one, and that's where I got the name of this podcast. Uh, no matter which path of logic you trace in human history, it comes down to that the great object is that every man be armed. Because even if you look at the slave rebellions under Spartacus in Rome, right? Spartacus, he freed a bunch of slaves with him as one of them, and instead of grabbing the gold and silver, he made sure that nobody grabbed any gold and silver. He's like, we won't even have a chance to spend it. Why would we grab this? So what he did grab was iron, and iron during the Iron Age was basically nukes in the nuclear age. Like slaves, an army of slaves now had weapons and armor on par with the Roman Empire, and they were afraid to go after him because, like, no matter who they sent after him, he would defeat them. And the ones that didn't, and the ones that could probably go defeat him, there was no glory in going after a slave. And if they lost, they had lost to a slave, so that's even worse, right? So, like, I think everything comes back to, like, the great object that is every man be armed. That's something we should never ever, even at the point of violence, allow our government to take our guns,
Well, yeah,
because
a free
at that.
people,
Mhm.
are not disarmed. Like,
Exactly.
they're not. So that threat always needs to be present. It always needs to be present. It doesn't need to be used necessarily all the time, and it shouldn't be, because you don't live in a civil society if that's the case. But the threat always needs to be present, and that is why the Second Amendment is so valuable in this country, and why we have so many people across the world, especially in Europe, with what they're dealing with now, wondering why they don't have it themselves. And they're envious of our ability to do that, because they're completely unarmed and they're at the will of the government, and all the most they can do is, burn cars and disrupt society. They can't actually do anything with it.
Mhm.
Sorry to cut you off, Travis, but yeah,
Oh, no, you're good,
it's a
brother.
pivotal. The component of being and having an armed society is so necessary for a free society, that
Mhm.
the second anyone attempts to change that,
Mhm.
there should be a reaction to it. That should, in and of itself, if you're looking at the NAP, that should be a NAP violation by itself, the attempt to disarm people.
Well, it is in the Geneva Convention. Of course, not everybody's a signatory to the Geneva Convention, but still, like if you're trying to disarm a people, that is considered a war crime, just by all laws of war. So you're trying to turn them into your subjects, your slaves, by taking their guns. So in a very real way, Saddam Aslan Salim, the guy from Bangladesh, is trying to turn me, a Virginian, into his slave because he's trying to take our guns. And that is not going to end well because my people, the Appalachian people, a lot of people don't realize this, but we are the only people in the history of the United States that has managed to get a constitutional amendment overturned. They came up here expecting to shut down our moonshine stills, burning down our family, burning down our homes, killing our kids and stuff like that. We fought back, and we fought back because we were good at it. We're the first stop when there's a draft for a war. We're the very last ones to come home during a war. We fought back, and they got tired of losing so many revenue agents that they went home and changed the Constitution about it. They were that scared of us. Hollywood tries to tell you that we're all inbred, stupid barbarians and stuff like that. But the truth of the matter is, like, I'm just a regular old Appalachian. I'm not really that special in any way. So, like, when somebody from Bangladesh is trying to turn me into his slave, that's not going to go well for him because we've fought back before and we can do it again, you know? How about you, Justin?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the right to bear arms is important for individual sovereignty. It's also important for national security. You know, a nation of armed individuals where you don't necessarily know where all the guns are is a hell of a lot harder to take on a land front.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, just sort of ping-ponging back and forth, you know, one thing that I think a lot of the people clamoring for the free stuff lack is the recognition that they too are asking for a form of slavery. You know, I mean, if you're saying that everyone's entitled to medical care, for example, then you're saying everyone who provides medical care is going to have to take whatever the heck the government gives them. They're not going to be able to negotiate a wage. And so then where's the incentive to become the world's greatest brain surgeon? You know, it doesn't exist. You know, and ultimately, you know, I think that people just don't think that through, unfortunately, to its logical conclusion the way, you know, we would obviously like them to. And as a result, we end up with more and more of this, you know, centralized control. And particularly with the gun, if you're looking at, to some extent, the clash between rural and urban life. You know, most of the gun control measures are more really supported in your urban areas. And perhaps some of that is just a lot of people in those urban areas have never had any experience with a gun, or certainly not a good experience with a gun. Whereas in a rural area, it's probably been necessary to save your life from an animal, or at the very least, you know, provided you with the sense of security in your home that you wouldn't otherwise have. And so bringing that cultural divide and helping people understand that this isn't just about, you know, everyone, so that we can have this crazy society where everyone's just shooting everyone all the time. It actually leads to a safer society when everyone has the ability to protect themselves.
Yeah, well said on that. It's the most important thing in the world, in my opinion. It just doesn't matter which tyrant you settle. Like, everybody being armed makes them at least think twice. And even when they do attack, they always lose. Well, at least you can force what's called a Pyrrhic victory, where it doesn't really benefit them in winning. You know what I mean? But we're coming up on the close of the hour here. I just want to thank you guys for sharing your time with me. And I'm sure everybody watching is like super thrilled you guys are here. Thank you so much again to everybody watching. One thing that I want to focus on at the end of these shows is that we have homework, because sitting around talking about these things is one thing, but actually bettering yourself and making yourself a more capable person is what's going to produce more liberty in the long term. So what I thought might be fun is to let the guests choose our homework. So what I'm asking Justin and Sean for here is a physical task, a mental task, and a social task, because you got to sharpen your body, because a strong mind and a weak body doesn't matter, and vice versa. And social, because people really matter. People matter more than anything. So I'm gonna let them take it away. Tell us what we're doing for homework this week.
Justin, you want to go first on this, or I've been going first a lot. Or I'll take it if you want, but
It's up to you, boss. I can go first. So for physical, I would say identify that libertarian cause that you want to have an impact on, and literally get out there and take action on it. And just be present for that issue and do what you can to move it forward. Mental, I think, take your best skill and try and teach it to someone who is important to you, and try and learn a new skill for yourself. We're coming up on a time, particularly with inflation, where the more skills you have in your wheelhouse, the better off you're going to be. And as far as social goes, get to know your community around you. Not so much to necessarily change anyone's mind, but to get to know where their heads are at, to get to know the issues that are important to them. Oftentimes libertarians spend their time on issues that 90% of the public is not concerned with or not focused on. And sometimes we need to bring their focus to that. But the way to do that is to meet people where they're currently at.
Right on. How about you, Sean?
For physical, I'll go with learn how to do something new with your hands, whether it's fixing something in your house, whether it's working on something. There's plenty of information out there on how to do almost anything now on the internet. Pick something yourself. Don't pay somebody to fix it. Fix it. Learn the skill. Those skills bridge onto other skills, and it's always good for anybody to have a large skill set when you need it. For mental tasks, I'll switch it up a little bit. I'll go read something that or investigate something at a minimum that you disagree with. Find a thing that you think you hate. Could be anything, could be communism, could be an individual's perspective, whatever it is, and just read on it. Either you're going to find out you still don't like it, but you'll be more educated on the topic, or it could change your mind, whatever that particular issue is. And then as a social task, go to a local government meeting, whether it's your town or your county or your state, whatever it is. Go to a meeting and just sit there and see how things are run. I don't think enough of us in America have been to a local government meeting and seen what is going on there. They've not experienced it. They don't know how it's run. And what you'll find from that is probably open positions in your local, whether it's planning board or some commission or something. There's something there, right? And go apply to get on it if you have the time. If you can spend 3 to 4 hours a month on an issue in your local town, not only will you be involved in your local town to doing something productive, but you're also going to learn who operates in the town, who has say in how things work, and you'll actually start to notice why things are dysfunctional, and then you can start to plan or a network with people on how to fix those particular problems. But the social one is definitely a get local, and showing up to your local town meeting for a few hours just next month is not that much time. It's not a huge investment. It's completely free. You pay for it anyways. So you might as well go and see how things run locally where you live, so you can see if you need to get involved enough to change it.
All right. Well, you guys plug whatever you want to plug, and then I'll take us out, because we're coming up on Free's show. He's been working on it for about a year now. He's got Spike Cohen and Justin Amash, and it's going to be an absolute banger. So go ahead and take that away. Whatever you want to plug, Sean, go right for it.
I mean, we're here, all of us are in the American Liberty Caucus for a reason. Our view is we need to get good people, competent people that will volunteer their time to actually do work. And it's doing work is what actually matters. People need to understand that those who show up are the ones that are making a difference, and they are in control of things. And the more people that agree with us that show up, the more control we can have to guide things in a way that we see fit, and guide those things based on our views, and hopefully provide a net positive for our communities. So go and take a look at us. AmericanLiberty.info is our website. You can find us on X at AL Caucus. We are all, you can reach all of us that are there. I respond to emails regularly from people. We have a Discord. If you reach out through at least our X handle, you can get an invite to the Discord. There's a ton of people in there. Majority of them are libertarian. There's some Republicans in there. I don't think there's really a whole lot of Democrats, but it's people that value local issues and value property rights and value America. So it's a good spot. It's a positive, productive spot, and I genuinely take a lot of pride in that. We are a unique group of people in our space. A lot of that comes to both of you guys on the podcast, and a great group of people that are listening right now that have commented, and a great group of people in the Discord itself. I may share it, but it doesn't exist without everybody else. And you guys are super valuable. I've had more people come to me say that we have a unique space in the libertarian movement itself, and the liberty movement as a whole. A lot of places are black-pilled. A lot of places are negative. Our space is about work and positivity and supporting each other. And that stuff is really what builds communities. It's really what makes a difference. And it provides a great network for people. When you need a hand with something, you can reach out. When you have an idea, you can reach out. If you're running a campaign, you can reach out. Lots of experience in there. So really, please take a look at least our X handle, AL Caucus, and reach out if you want an invite. And you can always email us through the website, and we're always there to help out people that are trying to move the needle. So thank you, Travis, for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I'll let Justin go.
All right.
Well, I couldn't really top too much what you just said there. Basically, we recapped most of it, but definitely get involved. Reach out to us at AL Caucus on X, and look forward to working with everybody.
All right. And Free the Mitten says, fight the state, not each other. I agree with that, brother. You preach it. All right. Well, until next time, this is Travis J. Wells of Appalachian Liberty, and the great object is that every man be armed. Thanks, guys. We'll see you.